The day I almost lost my family's land was the day I discovered I owned the entire valley. Linda Whitmore called the cops on my illegal cabin at 7 a.m. Police sirens cut through the morning mist, smoke from my chimney mixing with diesel exhaust. She had no idea that I didn't just own the land. I owned her mortgage, her husband's business lease, and the road she drove in on. 3 months of escalating harassment, noise complaints when I was dead asleep, structure violations on a cabin that existed before she was born, threatening letters demanding $500 a day fines. Randon fought the fines on her, but Linda had no clue what she'd started. By the time I was done, she'd be facing courthouse steps, news cameras, and a truth that would wipe that smug smile right off her Botoxed face. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your location. I want to know if HOA Karens are this bad everywhere. Let me take you back to where this all started. My grandfather bought 2,400 acres in Montana's Clearwater Valley back in 1963 for $800. $800. That's what a decent dinner costs now. He got timber rights, mineral rights, water rights, the whole enchilada. Smart old coot knew what he was doing. I inherited this land when I was 28, right after my parents died in a car accident. Spent every summer here as a kid, learning carpentry from Grandpa, building this A-frame cabin with my own hands. 200 square feet of pure independence, solar panels, well water, composting toilet. Completely off-grid and legal in every single way. After burning out in corporate software consulting, I chose the simple life. Work remote, breathe clean air. No traffic jams or office politics, just me, the mountains, and the sound of wind through pine trees. But gentrification was creeping up the valley like a slow-motion avalanche. California money buying up plots, building McMansions that looked like they belonged in Beverly Hills, not Big Sky country. The newest eyesore was Clearwater Estates. 32 luxury homes ranging from $800,000 to $2 million, managed by Whitmore Properties. Enter Linda Whitmore. Picture this. 52 years old, bleach blonde hair sprayed into a helmet, driving a white Escalade that probably cost more than most people's houses. She was HOA president and the real estate developer, which should have been the first red flag. Her motivation was crystal clear. She wanted my land for Phase 2 expansion. With my property, she could triple the value of her existing lots. Her first move was subtle. A certified letter claiming my cabin violated neighborhood standards and demanding $500 per day in fines. The letter came on paper so smooth and expensive it felt like silk between my fingers, a stark contrast to the honest, rough-hewn logs of my cabin walls. When she showed up at my door for the first inspection, I'll never forget the sound of her stiletto heels clicking on my wooden porch boards like a woodpecker with anger issues. Her perfume was so overwhelming it mixed with the pine sap scent and made my eyes water. She stood there with her pristine manicure, looking at my work-roughened hands like I was something she'd scrape off her shoe. "This structure is completely inappropriate for our community standards," she announced, waving one manicured finger at my cabin. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice level, "this cabin was built in 1995. Your community didn't exist until 2018. Her research must have confirmed what I already knew. My land wasn't technically part of her HOA. Grandpa's deed predated her development by 40 years. So Linda pivoted strategies. If she couldn't use HOA rules, she'd find any violation to force a sale. Building codes, health department, fire marshal. She was going to throw everything at me until something stuck. The smell of her cigarettes from her idling Escalade mixed with the pine-scented mountain breeze as she stood on my porch, plotting my downfall. She had no idea that every threat, every complaint, every legal maneuver was just digging her hole deeper. "You can't fight progress," she said with that fake smile real estate agents perfect in the mirror. "This valley is going to be developed whether you like it or not." I watched her drive away, her white Escalade kicking up dust on the gravel road my grandfather had built with his own hands. The sound of her engine faded into the distance, replaced by the whisper of wind through pine needles and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. What Linda didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that she'd just declared war on the wrong family. Grandpa hadn't just bought land, he'd bought power. And I was about to learn exactly how much power that was. Linda's first real shot across the bow came 2 weeks later, an anonymous tip to the county inspector about an unpermitted structure. I had to laugh. She wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. Inspector Jake Morrison showed up on a Tuesday morning, apologetic but professional. Good old boy with calloused hands and work boots that had seen actual work. Sorry about this, son. Got a complaint? Have to check it out. You know how it is. No problem, Jake. Come on in. We walked through every inch of my cabin. Jake's flashlight beam danced across hand-fitted joints, proper electrical work, structural supports that could probably survive a tornado. His eyebrows kept climbing higher as we went. Son, this place is built better than most houses in town. Who did the work? My grandfather and I. Took us 3 summers. Jake pulled out the original building permits from 1995. Signed and stamped by his predecessor, everything legal, everything documented, everything done right. Whoever called this in was either blind or lying, he muttered, making notes on his clipboard. But Linda wasn't done. The smell of her cigarettes lingered in the mountain air the next morning when I found her business card tucked under my windshield wiper. On the back, she'd written, State Environmental Agency complaint filed. Illegal sewage disposal. You're done. She was escalating to state level, trying to overwhelm me with bureaucracy. Time for my counterpunch. I called my college buddy Marcus, who traded his environmental science degree for a law degree and now specialized in exactly this kind of harassment. Bring in a professional septic inspector, he advised. Document everything, and I mean everything. The septic inspection happened at 6 a.m. sharp. The rumble of the pump truck echoing across the valley probably woke every neighbor within 5 miles, but it was worth it. Professional analysis proved my system was cleaner than most municipal plants. The inspector, a weathered guy named Bob, who'd been doing this for 30 years, whistled appreciatively. Son, I've seen million-dollar homes with systems half as good as yours. Whoever complained about this doesn't know, if you'll pardon the expression. But here's where it got interesting. Bob mentioned something that made my morning coffee taste a whole lot better. Funny thing is, he said, we got another call this week about graywater discharge into Clearwater Creek. Traced. It back to that new development. Up the road, Whitmore Properties. I think while Linda was attacking my perfectly legal septic system, her own development was dumping contaminated water into the creek. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a chainsaw. Linda's harassment campaign had just exposed her own environmental violations. Marcus nearly choked on his coffee when I called him with the news. Here's something most people don't know. If your septic system was installed before 1990, you're grandfathered in under most state regulations, Marcus explained. Linda was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Jake Morrison stopped by later that week, ostensibly to deliver the official inspection report. Clean bill of health, system exceeds all requirements. But he lingered on my porch, accepting a cup of coffee and sharing what was really on his mind. 23 years I've been doing this job, he said, the pine-scented breeze carrying his words across the valley. Seen a lot of developers come and go, but I've never seen someone file this many bogus complaints in such a short time. You're the 3rd property owner she's targeted this month. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my cabin. This was about keeping corporate greed from destroying the last wild place my family had protected. Linda wasn't just trying to steal my land, she was trying to erase everything my grandfather had built. The sound of chainsaws echoed. Across the valley as I cut deadfall for winter firewood, a deliberate show of defiance. Each swing of the axe felt like a promise to Grandpa that I wouldn't let his legacy be turned into another strip mall. But this was just round 1. Linda's environmental complaint had backfired spectacularly, but I could already see her white Escalade parked at various county offices around town. She was planning her next move, and I had a feeling it was going to be bigger than building codes and septic systems. The evening air carried the scent of sawdust and engine oil from my work, mixed with the eternal smell of pine trees and mountain air. Somewhere in town, Linda was probably on the phone with lawyers, planning her next assault. What she didn't know was that every attack just gave me more evidence of her pattern of harassment. I was starting to build a case that would make her previous schemes look like amateur hour. Linda's next salvo came through the fire marshal. Apparently, my dangerous wood stove installation was now a threat to public safety. The woman had more angles than a geometry textbook. Fire Marshal Betty Chen arrived with a full inspection team, clipboards ready, looking like they were expecting to find a meth lab instead of a wood stove. Betty was all business, former military by the look of her posture, and not easily impressed by anyone's. "Show me what you've got," she said simply. What I had was showcase quality work. Copper pipes gleaming like new pennies, proper clearances that exceeded code by 6 inches, top-grade materials that cost more than Linda probably spent on her monthly Botox. Betty's team photographed everything, measured clearances, tested airflow. "Mind if we use these photos for training materials?" Betty asked. "This is textbook installation. Better than most professional jobs I see." But Linda wasn't done escalating. She'd filed a complaint with the State Department of Natural Resources, claiming I was running a commercial timber harvesting operation without permits. The absurdity would have been hilarious if it wasn't so malicious. I cut deadfall for personal firewood, completely legal, like picking up sticks in your backyard. DNR agent Tom Rodriguez had to drive 2 hours from Helena just to explain to Linda that landowners can manage their own forests. "Ma'am, this is the 5th time you've called this month," Tom confided during his inspection. He was clearly annoyed, his patience wearing thinner than tissue paper. "Mr. Johnson here is within his rights. In fact, removing deadfall actually improves forest health." While Linda was wasting state resources on bogus complaints, I started digging into her business practices. What I found made my morning coffee taste like victory. Whitmore Properties LLC had some interesting financial arrangements. Linda was claiming development consultation fees from buyers, while never mentioning her dual role as HOA president. Classic conflict of interest, potentially fraudulent. She was double-dipping, getting paid to sell lots and then getting paid, again to consult on development. Restrictions. Most people don't realize that HOA board members have to disclose financial interests in any deals. Involving the community, my lawyer friend Marcus explained when I called him with my findings. Linda was about to learn why those rules exist. That's when the community started rallying around me. Old Pete, a retired logger who lived downstream, confirmed that Linda had been pressuring him to sell. Offered me half what my land's worth, then threatened eminent domain when I said no. He growled, his weathered hands clenched around a coffee mug at Maria's diner. Maria Santos, who owned the local diner and had fed 3 generations of Valley residents, shared her own Linda horror stories. The bitter taste of her strong coffee matched the bitter taste Linda was leaving in everyone's mouth. She's been spreading rumors about health code violations at my place. 30 years in business, never had a single complaint until she showed up. David Kim was the real surprise, a new resident who'd bought into Linda's development thinking he was getting a deal. Turns out he'd been overcharged by $50,000 for his lot, with Linda pocketing the difference through her consultation fees. The sound of my chainsaw echoing across the valley became a daily ritual, cutting firewood with deliberate defiance. Each log split with a satisfying crack that seemed to announce my intentions to the whole valley. The scent of sawdust mixed with engine oil in Old Pete's workshop, where we started planning our response. "You know what really gets me?" Pete said, running his thumb along the edge of a well-worn axe blade. "She comes in here from California with her fancy car and fake smile, thinking she can push around families who've been here for generations." Maria nodded, wiping down the counter with the kind of precision that comes from decades of practice. "My grandfather built this diner in 1952. Fed loggers, ranchers, people who worked with their hands. Now she wants to turn this whole valley into some kind of theme park for rich people. But Linda's harassment campaign was far from over. I could see her white Escalade parked outside the county courthouse most afternoons, no doubt cooking up her next scheme. The woman had more persistence than a telemarketer and twice the moral flexibility. What she didn't realize was that every government agency she called, every false complaint she filed, every threat she made was creating a paper trail that would eventually bury her. I was documenting everything, building a case that would make her previous harassment look like a friendly, Suggestion. The evening air carried the scent of wood smoke from my chimney, mixing with the eternal pine fragrance of the mountains. Somewhere in town, Linda was probably plotting her next move, but now I had allies, evidence, and a growing understanding that this fight was about more than just my cabin. This was about stopping a pattern of abuse that had been going on long enough. Linda's harassment campaign reached a new level of desperation over the next month. Daily wellness checks from the sheriff's department became my new normal. Bogus noise complaints when my cabin was dead silent. She even called Child Protective Services, claiming my unfit living conditions were endangering children, despite the fact that I lived alone and the nearest kid was 5 miles away. The breaking point came at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Deputy Johnson's cruiser came rumbling up my gravel driveway, red and blue lights cutting through the darkness like angry fireflies. The crunch of his boots on frost-covered ground announced another bogus call. "Domestic disturbance report," he said, clearly embarrassed. "Sorry, but I have to check." I stood there in my pajamas and bare feet, the cabin dark behind me, no other soul within miles. "Deputy, do I look like I'm disturbing anyone but myself right now?" He sighed, making notes. He probably wouldn't file. I'm getting 2 to 3 calls per week, all from the same number. Between you and me, this is harassment. Plain and simple. Linda escalated to the legal system, filing for an emergency injunction, claiming my threatening behavior at an HOA meeting I never attended. Small claims court on a Thursday morning. Linda arrived with an expensive lawyer in a suit that probably cost more than my truck. I represented myself with a manila folder and the truth. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Wells, looked about as impressed with Linda's theatrics as I was. "Your Honor," Linda's lawyer began, "my client fears for her safety due to Mr. Johnson's increasingly erratic behavior." I stood up, pulled out my phone, and projected security camera. Footage onto the courtroom wall, date, and timestamps clearly showing I wasn't anywhere near the supposed meeting where I had allegedly threatened her. Judge Wells dismissed the case in under 5 minutes. "Miss Whitmore, I'm warning you about filing frivolous complaints. This court has better things to do. Time to bring in professional help. I hired private investigator Sarah Chen, no relation to the fire marshal, but equally no nonsense. What she found made Linda's harassment look like amateur hour. Your Linda has a pattern," Sarah reported over coffee at Maria's diner. The PI's findings were spread across the worn wooden table like evidence in a murder case. She's done this exact thing in 3 other communities, always targets landowners, adjacent to potential developments. The pattern was crystal clear. Linda had been sued twice for HOA board conflicts of interest. Her real estate license was suspended in California for undisclosed dual representation. Most damning of all, she owed $180,000 in back taxes on her Montana properties. "Here's a tip for anyone dealing with HOA harassment," Sarah advised, tapping her pen on a thick folder of evidence. "Document everything with timestamps. Those records become crucial evidence when you need to prove a pattern of abuse." The community was rallying like I'd never seen. Old Pete revealed that Linda had tried to buy his land for half-market value, threatening eminent domain when he refused. Linda told me the government would take it anyway if I didn't sell to her. Pure intimidation. Maria shared that Linda had been spreading rumors about health code violations at the diner, trying to pressure her into selling the building. 30 years feeding this community, and she wants to turn my place into a Starbucks. David Kim discovered he'd paid $50,000 over market rate for his lot, with Linda pocketing the difference through hidden fees. She called them premium location adjustments. I called them theft. The sound of gravel crunching under tires became Linda's calling card. Every time another sheriff's cruiser rolled up for another bogus call, I'd document the time, take photos, record conversations. My evidence folder was getting thicker than a phone book. Linda's smug expression in the courthouse hallway after her failed injunction attempt was captured perfectly on the security cameras. That look of entitled confidence would be wiped away soon enough. I found myself leaning against the rough bark of the old pine tree behind my cabin during strategy calls, the texture grounding me while I planned my next moves. The tree had weathered storms for decades, just like my family's hold on this land would weather Linda's assault. But Linda wasn't done. Her financial desperation was making her bolder, more reckless. The woman was doubling down on a losing hand, and I could practically smell the fear sweat through her expensive perfume during our chance encounters at the post office. What she didn't know was that every escalation, every false complaint, every desperate legal maneuver was just adding evidence to a case that would eventually destroy her. I was playing the long game, and Linda was too panicked to see the trap closing around her. The evening air carried the scent of pine needles and wood smoke, peaceful sounds of wind through the trees replacing the chaos of Linda's harassment. But I knew this was just the calm before the storm, because I was about to discover something that would change everything. The game-changing discovery came while I was researching county records for my defense against Linda's latest bogus lawsuit. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. I was looking for ammunition to defend myself and instead found a nuclear weapon. Buried in the maze of county filing systems, I stumbled across something massive. Linda's development company had taken out a $2,300,000 construction loan in 2019, standard stuff for a developer. But the collateral wasn't just her own land. It was a complex web that included future development rights across the entire valley. That's when I started digging deeper. My grandfather hadn't just owned his 2,400 acres. The old records revealed something that made my coffee cup freeze, halfway to my lips. He owned the mineral rights under most of the valley, including Linda's entire development. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was what else I found. Grandpa held first mortgage position on 3 key properties that Linda had been using as leverage for her construction loan, properties she claimed to own free and clear when applying for financing. How had this been hidden for so long? Grandpa's estate was complex, managed by an old-school attorney who died in 2018. The new estate lawyer had never fully explained the scope of my inheritance. County records were scattered across multiple filing systems, some dating back to territorial days, filed under different naming conventions. I spent 14 hours in the county records office, my eyes burning from reading microfilm and faded documents. But what I discovered was worth every minute of eye strain. Grandpa's 1963 purchase included all rights, appurtenances, and future development considerations, legal language from the 1960s that gave me veto power over any development affecting the watershed. The leverage bomb was incredible. Linda's entire development was built on land where I controlled mineral and water rights. Her construction loan was in default. She'd missed 2 payments during her harassment campaign against me. The bank was getting nervous about her ability to complete Phase 2, which required my land to be financially viable. When I finally reached the estate lawyer, grandson, of Grandpa's original attorney, he confirmed my reading of the documents. Your grandfather was smarter than most people realized, he said over the phone. He specifically designed this structure to prevent exactly what Miss Whitmore is attempting. That's when I found the handwritten note tucked inside the original deed, Grandpa's careful script on yellowed paper. For my grandson, never let them turn this valley into another strip mall. I sat in my truck outside the courthouse holding that note and finally understood this wasn't just inheritance. It was a stewardship responsibility. Grandpa had known that someday someone like Linda would come along, and he'd prepared for this fight 60 years before it started. Most people think property ownership is simple. You buy land, you own it, I said to myself, reading through the implications. But mineral rights, water rights, and development easements can be separate. Your grandfather might have been smarter than you realized. Linda had no idea that I now held all the cards. Her harassment campaign, her legal threats, her attempts to force me off my land. All of it was built on the false assumption that she had the power and I didn't. The question now was strategy. I could deliver a quick knockout punch, revealing everything immediately and watching her empire crumble. Or I could let her dig her hole deeper while building an absolutely bulletproof case. I decided on the latter. Let Linda escalate her attacks while I quietly gathered allies and evidence. When the truth finally came out, it would be so comprehensive, so devastating, that she'd never recover. As I drove home, windows down, the scent of pine trees and mountain air filling my truck, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: complete confidence. The hunted had become the hunter, and Linda Whitmore had no idea what was coming. Time to assemble my team. This wasn't a one-man operation anymore. Linda's pattern of abuse had hurt too many people, and it was time for coordinated justice. First, the legal dream team. My estate attorney, plus Marcus, my environmental lawyer friend from college. Then Maria's nephew, Carlos, a forensic accountant who specialized in tracking dirty money through shell companies. For community support, old Pete, Maria, David, Kim, plus 3 other neighbors who'd been harassed by Linda's schemes. The strategy session happened at Maria's diner after closing time. Coffee brewing, pie cooling on the counter, legal documents spread across tables where 3 generations of locals had made important decisions. The worn wooden surface had absorbed decades of conversations, and tonight it would witness the planning of Linda's downfall. Phase 1, Marcus explained. Drawing diagrams on napkins, let Linda escalate while we build ironclad documentation. Phase 2, reveal just enough to make her desperate. Phase 3, public confrontation with full evidence and media present. The legal maneuvers began immediately, filing a quiet title action to clarify my comprehensive land rights. This would force Linda to respond in court, revealing her legal position. Environmental impact study request for Linda's Phase 2 expansion, knowing I had veto power. Formal complaint to the State Real Estate Board about Linda's undisclosed conflicts of interest. Carlos's forensic investigation revealed the scope of Linda's financial crimes. She'd been using HOA dues to pay personal legal bills. Classic embezzlement. She double-mortgaged her own properties to fund the development. Most damning, her construction company had liens from unpaid subcontractors totaling over $300,000. In most Western states, mineral rights can be sold separately from surface rights, I explained to the group, coffee steam rising between us like incense. Always check your deeds language carefully. Your family might own more than you think. Community organizing kicked into high gear. Weekly coffee meetings at Maria's became strategy sessions. We established a shared legal fund for affected neighbors. Most importantly, we planned to attend the next HOA meeting in force. Linda wouldn't be able to intimidate a room full of United residents. My cabin became evidence central. Security cameras at every angle. Professional-grade audio recording equipment for all future interactions with Linda. I hired a professional surveyor to create detailed maps confirming my property boundaries and rights. Every conversation, every threat, every bogus complaint was documented with precision. HOA board members who profit from deals involving the community must disclose this. It's called fiduciary duty, Marcus explained during one of our evening planning sessions. Violations can mean personal liability for damages. The beauty of a quiet title action became clear as Marcus walked us through the process. This legal procedure forces everyone claiming rights to your property to prove their case in court. It's like clearing the air officially. Linda would have to respond, and when she did, her entire house of cards would be examined under oath. I found myself visiting Grandpa's grave more often during this planning phase, promising to protect the valley he'd preserved. The granite headstone was simple, weathered by mountain storms. But the man's legacy was more complex than I'd ever imagined. This fight wasn't just about property. It was about community values versus corporate greed. The scent of coffee and pie in Maria's kitchen became the backdrop for late-night strategy sessions. The sound of pens scratching on legal pads, the rustle of documents, the quiet determination of people who'd been pushed too far and were finally pushing back. Linda's white Escalade drove past the diner more frequently, slowing down as she tried to peer through the windows. She knew something was happening but couldn't figure out what. Her increasingly frantic behavior, calling county offices daily, showing up at city council meetings to complain about troublemakers, just added to our evidence file. The plan for the climax was elegant in its simplicity. Linda's annual HOA meeting was mandatory for all residents, the perfect venue for a public revelation with witnesses and potential media coverage. She'd present her Phase 2 expansion proposal, expecting easy approval from intimidated residents. Instead, she'd face a united community armed with evidence, legal documentation, and the truth about her criminal activities. The setting would be the community center, neutral, ground with media access and sheriff's deputies on standby for expected disruption. As I sat on my cabin porch that evening, watching the sun set over the valley Linda wanted to destroy, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this whole nightmare began. Anticipation. The hunted had become the hunter. The trap was set, and Linda Whitmore was about to walk straight into it. The evening air carried the eternal scent of pine trees, but underneath was something new, the smell of justice brewing. Linda's desperation reached new heights as her financial world started crumbling. Anonymous Craigslist ads appeared offering my abandoned cabin for $500 per month rent. Fake social media profiles posted my address as a squatter location where people could camp for free. She even hired a private security company to patrol around my property line. The sabotage escalation was both pathetic and dangerous. My solar panels were mysteriously damaged overnight. Security cameras caught a white Escalade creeping around at 2 a.m. My driveway was blocked with no trespassing signs that I'd never posted. Most seriously, someone had tampered with my water well cover, potentially contaminating my drinking supply. Every incident was documented with photos, video, timestamps, and detailed notes. The security system I'd upgraded captured everything in high-definition clarity: motion sensors, night vision cameras, audio recording. My cabin was now better protected than Fort Knox. But Linda's financial desperation was the real story. Bank notices started arriving at her office daily. The default notice on her $2,300,000 construction loan was just the beginning. Subcontractors were filing mechanics' liens faster than she could contest them. Her entire empire was collapsing and she was getting frantic. The bribery attempt came on a Tuesday morning. Linda approached me directly, her usual arrogance replaced by barely concealed panic. The overwhelming scent of her perfume couldn't quite mask the fear sweat underneath. "Let's be reasonable here," she said, her voice pitched higher than usual. "I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer, $400,000 cash for your cabin and 50 acres. When I politely declined, she increased to $600,000. Then $800,000. Her final offer made my morning coffee nearly shoot out my nose. $200,000 plus assumption of all legal fees. "I appreciate the offers, Linda," I said. "Audio recorder capturing every word. But this land isn't for sale at any price." My counteroffer was calculated to drive her over the edge. "Tell you what, though, you can purchase my approval for Phase 2 development for $5 million. Cash only." Her face cycled through confusion, rage, and terror in about 3 seconds. "What the hell are you talking about? You can't block development. You're just a squatter with delusions of grandeur." "I wonder what your investors would think if they knew about your financial situation," I mused, watching her pupils dilate with panic. The community pressure was mounting from all sides. Other residents discovered Linda had been inflating HOA budgets to fund her personal legal battles. David Kim found additional deed restrictions Linda had never mentioned when he bought his lot. Old Pete's property taxes had mysteriously spiked after he refused her lowball offers, clear retaliation. Through her county connections, Linda's PR campaign became increasingly unhinged. Facebook posts about dangerous squatters threatening neighborhood children, next-door complaints about unsanitary conditions that somehow endangered property values 3 miles away, anonymous letters to the local newspaper about environmental hazards from my perfectly legal off-grid setup. My counterintelligence operation was comprehensive. Sarah Chen, my PI, traced every anonymous complaint back to Linda's devices through IP addresses and metadata. The environmental lawyer conducted surprise water quality tests, proving my land had the cleanest water in the valley. Social media evidence showed Linda's network of fake accounts and coordinated harassment campaigns. But the most satisfying development was watching her lose control of the narrative. I'd quietly informed the bank about Linda's harassment campaign affecting the loan collateral, my land that she needed for Phase 2 viability. The environmental lawyer filed formal complaints about Linda's creek contamination. The state real estate board opened a full investigation into her dual representation violations. The sound of tree branches cracking echoed across the valley where Linda's hired security team had accidentally damaged my property while patrolling. The acrid scent of damaged solar panel electronics mixed with pine sap when I surveyed the sabotage. Each incident just added to the evidence file that would eventually bury her. Linda's increasingly haggard appearance during our confrontations told the whole story. Designer clothes that looked slept in, makeup applied with a shaking hand, the white Escalade that now had a dent in the front bumper from her increasingly reckless driving. If someone's harassing you about property rights, always check if they have financial motivation, I told Maria during one of our strategy sessions. Desperation makes people do stupid things that leave evidence trails. The evening air carried the scent of wood smoke from my chimney, a deliberate signal that I wasn't going anywhere despite her escalating attacks. Somewhere in town, Linda was probably on the phone with lawyers, trying to find some legal loophole that didn't exist. What she didn't know was that every threat, every bribe attempt, every act of sabotage was just adding fuel to a fire that would soon consume her entire operation. The trap was nearly ready to spring. Linda's final desperate gambit was a masterpiece of fraud and stupidity. Forged documents claiming my grandfather had sold development rights in 1987, 24 years after his original purchase. A fake environmental impact study claiming my septic system was contaminating groundwater across 3 counties. And the crown jewel, an attempted restraining order claiming I'd threatened her with violence during a confrontation that never happened. The forgery unraveled faster than a cheap sweater. My estate attorney took one look at the supposed signature and started laughing. "This isn't even close to your grandfather's handwriting." Whoever did this has never seen his actual signature. The notary stamp was even more ridiculous, dated from a notary who died in 1985, 2 years before the document was allegedly signed. Professional paper dating tests confirmed what we already knew. The documents had been created recently using artificially aged paper. Linda had literally tried to forge history. Her environmental fraud was equally sloppy. The impact study contained water quality data from the Bitterroot Valley, 200 miles away. Different watershed, different geology, different everything. Meanwhile, professional lab tests proved my water was cleaner than the municipal supply in 3 surrounding towns. The restraining order hearing was where Linda's desperation reached its peak. She brought a professional witness who claimed to have seen me threaten her, a man who'd never met me in his life and couldn't pick me out of a 2-person lineup. I simply presented security footage, showing no contact between Linda and me for 6 consecutive weeks. The judge, clearly annoyed by the waste of court time, dismissed the case and ordered Linda to pay my legal fees. "Miss Whitmore," Judge Wells said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen every scam in the book, "this is your final warning about frivolous litigation. Next time there will be sanctions." But the real victory was watching Linda's smear campaign backfire spectacularly. The local newspaper investigated her claims and discovered her pattern of false accusations against multiple property owners. Environmental groups rallied around my conservation efforts, seeing Linda's harassment as an attack on rural land rights. Social media turned against her as evidence of her fraud spread. Screenshots of her fake environmental study circulated with devastating commentary from actual scientists. Her fake social media accounts were exposed and banned. Even her supporters in the development started distancing themselves. And Linda's financial collapse accelerated like an avalanche. The bank called her construction loan due immediately after discovering her forged collateral documents. The IRS placed liens on her properties for $180,000 in unpaid taxes. Her real estate license was formally suspended pending criminal investigation. My preparation for the endgame was methodical and comprehensive. Documentary filmmaker Ashley Kim, David's sister, arrived from Seattle to film the final confrontation. Marcus prepared a presentation of Linda's environmental violations that read like a criminal indictment. The community organized to attend the HOA meeting in force. Old Pete brought his Vietnam veteran buddies, men who dealt with corporate land grabs and government overreach their entire lives. Seen this playbook before, Pete said, his weathered hands steady as granite. Developers come in, try to intimidate locals, steal land through legal tricks. Time someone stood up to them. Maria organized catering for the community meeting, ensuring maximum turnout. Food brings people together, she said, the scent of fresh coffee and homemade pie filling her kitchen. Linda's about to learn what real community looks like. David Kim coordinated with other development residents who'd been overcharged, building a class action case that would recoup their losses and destroy Linda's remaining credibility. Linda's last-ditch efforts grew increasingly desperate. She tried to cancel the HOA annual meeting, illegal under state law. She attempted to exclude me from voting despite my mineral rights giving me legal standing. She even hired a crowd of fake supporters to stack the audience, but they were so obviously out of place that they just drew more attention to her deception. Technical preparation reached military levels of precision. A professional surveyor created detailed maps showing my comprehensive land rights in living color. Carlos, the forensic accountant, prepared a presentation of Linda's financial crimes that would make a federal prosecutor weep with joy. The Attorney General's office confirmed they were monitoring the situation. The setup for the climax was perfect. Community center booked, local news alerted to a major development story, sheriff's deputies on standby for expected disruption. Linda had no idea that her attempted empire was about to become a cautionary tale. The sound of increasing desperation in Linda's voice during recorded phone calls told the whole story. Fierce sweat penetrated her expensive perfume during our final chance encounter at the post office. The weight of grandfather's original deed documents in my briefcase felt like justice itself. When someone starts forging documents, they're admitting they know their legal position is hopeless. I told the documentary camera during a pre-meeting interview, document fraud is a felony, even in civil disputes. The evening before the showdown, I stood on my cabin porch, watching the sun set over the valley Linda had tried to steal. Tomorrow, 3 months of harassment, lies, and fraud would finally face the light of truth. The Clearwater Community Center had never seen anything like it. 150 residents packed into a space designed for 100, the air thick with tension and anticipation. The evening news crew set up in the back corner, cameras rolling. Ashley Kim positioned herself strategically with her documentary equipment. Sheriff's deputies flanked the exits, expecting trouble. Linda's faction huddled near the front, her expensive lawyer in a $3,000 suit, a handful of fake supporters who kept checking their phones like they'd rather be anywhere else, and a security guard who looked increasingly uncomfortable as the room filled with angry locals. My community filled the rest of the space. Old Pete and his Vietnam veteran buddies, weathered faces set in grim determination. Maria with her extended family, 3 generations of Valley residents. David Kim and the other defrauded development buyers armed with legal documents. The energy in the room was electric, like a thunderstorm about to break. Linda called the meeting to order, her voice pitched higher than usual, hands trembling slightly as she shuffled her presentation materials. Tonight we'll be voting on the Phase 2 expansion that will bring prosperity and progress to Clearwater Estates. Her PowerPoint was all corporate polish and empty promises. Artist renderings of McMansions, nestled among clear-cut hills, economic projections that assumed infinite growth, and at the center of it all, my grandfather's land marked as a future development parcel, and this illegal cabin, Linda said, pointing at a photo of my home, represents everything holding our community back from reaching its full potential. The HOA board recommends immediate eminent domain proceedings. That's when I stood up. Point of order. I'd like to address the assembly. Linda's face flushed red. You have no standing here. This is a private HOA meeting. Actually, I said, pulling out the microphone I brought, I do have standing. Would you like to see my mineral rights documentation? The room erupted. Linda tried to refuse. Her lawyer whispered urgent advice in her ear, but Deputy Johnson enforced meeting procedures. Let him speak, ma'am. This is still America. Let him speak. Let him speak. The chant started with Pete's veterans and spread through the entire room until Linda had no choice but to step aside. I connected my laptop to the projection system and displayed grandfather's original 1963 deed on the wall. Ladies and gentlemen, Linda's been trying to steal land she never had any right to touch. The revelation hit like a physical force. I explained mineral rights, water rights, development restrictions, the comprehensive legal framework that gave me veto power over any development affecting the watershed. This woman has spent 3 months harassing me for land that I not only own, but that she needs my permission to develop around. Linda's desperation exploded. Those documents are fake. He's a squatter and an environmental terrorist. He's been threatening me for months. Really? I clicked to the next slide. Let's talk about threats. The evidence avalanche began. Marcus presented court-certified deed documentation. Carlos revealed Linda's embezzlement of HOA funds, her double-mortgaged properties, her unpaid taxes. The environmental lawyer showed photos of Linda's illegal creek contamination alongside. Lab results proving my water was cleaner than municipal supplies. But it was the community that delivered the real knockout punches. Old Pete stood up, his voice carrying the authority of 8 decades. Linda tried to cheat me out of my grandfather's land, too. Offered half what it's worth, threatened eminent domain when I refused. Maria was next. She's been using HOA money to pay her personal lawyers. 30 years I've been feeding this community, and she wanted to destroy my diner for a parking lot. David Kim's revelation stunned even me. She overcharged me $50,000 for my lot and called it a premium location fee. Pure theft. Then came the mic drop moment. A man in a dark suit stood up from the back of the room. Ms. Whitmore, I'm Robert Chen from First National Bank. Your construction loan is in default and we're calling it due immediately. The room went dead silent. Your collateral is insufficient, and this gentleman owns the mineral rights under your entire development. Your Phase 2 expansion is financially impossible. Linda's meltdown was spectacular. She screamed about conspiracies and unfair treatment, threatened to sue everyone in the room, and in her rage, accidentally admitted to forging the 1987 documents. Those papers were perfect. You can't prove they're fake. Deputy Johnson stepped forward, notepad ready. Ma'am, did you just admit to document fraud on camera? The community vote was swift and merciless. Phase 2 expansion rejected, 87% to 13%. Vote of no confidence in Linda as president. Unanimous resolution supporting my conservation efforts passed by acclamation. As Linda was escorted out, still screaming threats and promises of revenge, I addressed the stunned audience. Linda, you just threatened me in front of 150 witnesses and 3 cameras. I think you're done. The gasps from the audience, the sight of Linda's face cycling through rage and terror, the smell of tension sweat in the overheated room. It was the sound and smell of justice finally arriving. 1 week later, Linda Whitmore was arrested for document fraud and embezzlement. The sight of her in handcuffs on the evening news felt like the final chapter of a story that had consumed my life for 3 months. Her properties entered foreclosure proceedings. Her real estate license was permanently revoked. The woman who tried to steal my family's legacy was facing 5 to 10 years in federal prison. The legal resolution came swiftly. My quiet title action confirmed comprehensive land rights across the entire valley. Environmental violations resulted in a $500,000 cent fine against Linda's company, money that would fund watershed restoration for decades. The HOA dissolved Linda's development company contract and elected new leadership, with Maria as president. But the real transformation was personal. I'd planned to live in the valley part-time, keeping 1 foot in the corporate world. Instead, I decided to stay permanently. This place wasn't just my inheritance anymore. It was my calling. I launched a conservation easement program protecting 1 to 800 acres of the most sensitive watershed areas. 3 neighboring families joined immediately, creating a buffer zone that would prevent future Linda Whitmores from destroying what took nature centuries to build. The program became a model for rural conservation across Montana. The community benefits multiplied like ripples in a pond. We established the Clearwater Valley Scholarship Fund using Linda's forfeited deposits, sending 3 local kids to college every year. The Conservation Trust protects the watershed for future generations while allowing sustainable forestry and responsible development. Our annual Harvest Festival celebrates community victory and traditional values. Last year, we had over 500 visitors supporting local businesses. Individual outcomes exceeded my wildest expectations. Old Pete's property values rose 40% due to conservation protections, securing his retirement after decades of hard work. Maria's Diner became the unofficial community center, thriving as the heart of our restored valley. David Kim not only recouped his overcharges through the class action lawsuit but became one of my closest friends and the conservation program's volunteer coordinator. 3 other communities contacted me about similar developer schemes, leading to a statewide network of rural landowner advocates. Ashley's documentary won the Regional Film Festival and raised national awareness about corporate land grabs in rural America. The state legislature introduced the Linda Law, preventing HOA conflict of interest abuse, real systemic change born from our local fight. Financial justice came full circle. Linda's seized assets partially reimbursed fraud victims. The money couldn't restore trust in the system. I purchased her foreclosed properties at auction, adding them to the conservation easement and ensuring they'd never threaten the valley again. The bank settled quietly, admitting inadequate due diligence and implementing stricter oversight procedures. The bigger picture impact still amazes me. Local newspaper series exposed similar schemes across rural America, creating a playbook for fighting corporate harassment. Environmental groups use our case as a template for landowner rights education. The real estate industry implemented stronger conflict of interest oversight because of what happened here. But the best part is the sounds that fill the valley now. Laughter of children at the Harvest Festival instead of Linda's courtroom threats. Wood smoke from community bonfires mixing with the eternal scent of pine needles underfoot. Bird songs and wind through trees instead of legal arguments and construction noise. Standing on my cabin porch at sunset, watching the valley vista unmarred by McMansions, I finally understood what Grandpa meant about stewardship. This wasn't just about property ownership. It was about protecting something irreplaceable for people not yet born. Always research who's really behind development pressure. Financial desperation drives most harassment, I tell people who contact me for advice. Mineral rights are often more valuable than surface rights. Check your family's old deeds. And remember, HOA board members must disclose conflicts of interest. It's the law in most states, even if they pretend it isn't. But Linda's arrest revealed she was small fish in a bigger pond. Her investigation led to a network of corrupt developers across 3 states. Next week, I'm telling you about how this network tried to steal an entire mountain range and how we stopped them. Drop a comment with your worst HOA or property dispute story. I read every single one and respond when I can. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more stories about standing up to corrupt authority, and join our Facebook group, Landowner Rights Warriors, for legal resources and support. Because together, we're stronger than any corporate bully. Grandpa, I kept my promise. The valley's safe.